get into some of the substance here. So I this has been mentioned by a lot of people, but it's a story here, and I won't read too much of it because it's archived, I suppose. I don't know. It's so Ukrainian woman honored to stand in local elections. So it's not just that they can vote, it's that they can run, which is the real poison pill when you think about it. Because of course an ethnic block of thousands of people in a small town or whatever can not only vote to a pandering gombeen who does their bidding, but they can vote for literally their own person who like they speak to in their own language and they meet in their own community groups, and it's totally insular. Like it might as well be the most basic ethnic block voting you could possibly imagine. You talk about that in the United States and in England and stuff like that, Muslims and black people and all this vote as blocks or whatever. But this would be a more extreme case because, let's say in an American case, you have African Americans who have been there for a long time. There is some form of, like, for all the issues in America, they have become a sort of a people of that state. You know, like a lot of them have been there hundreds of years as well. So there's some form of like democratic coherence to that in a way, I suppose. They've been there for a long time. They have a stake in the country. Whereas this is people who are fresh off the boat, maybe barely speak the language, are living in state-funded sort of block accommodation, completely, largely separate from the native population. And they have their own candidate. It's almost like it's really a nation within a nation. Like you have a small national group, or it's like an embassy. Like those little plantations of, let's say, Ukrainians in Killarney, that's effectively like an embassy of Ukraine. It's almost like Ukrainian territory, really. Those people aren't, you know, living their lives necessarily as if they're just completely part of the fabric of Irish culture. It couldn't be more opposite than that. They're quite literally in their own accommodation, their own world. So I'll just read some of it here. So she's honored to stand in local elections, and listen to this for a subheading. Natalia Krasnenkova says she, quote, would like to become a voice for the new communities in Kerry County Council. Now, the obvious, someone says black people in America are a nation among themselves. I know, but my point is how recent this is in Ireland and how structural it is. You know, it's whatever you say about America or whatever, this is more recent, more structural, more defined, and more alien in a sense. Whether it's Ukrainians or Syrians or whatever, I just mean on a systematic level, it's more industrialized and sort of unnatural in a sense. Anyway, you could debate the finer points of that, whatever. But yeah, she would like to become a voice for the new communities in Kerry County Council. Now, if you said new communities means foreigners, right? That's a euphemism. And it's like a nice euphemism. I'd rather if they just said what they're saying. But if that's a euphemism, then the euphemism for Irish people would be, well, old communities or existing communities, something like that. And again, if she said, if you vote, now someone like Derek, Phil, all these other candidates currently for local elections, they do say this, but they get called far right for it. They basically say, I want to be a voice for the old communities, the existing communities. That would be a euphemism for Irish people. I want to be a voice for Irish people distinctly, like as opposed to foreigners, like distinctly Irish people defined a certain way. You will be called far right, you will be hounded, you will be excluded from certain electoral events and stuff like that, like pre-electoral get-togethers and, you know, lunches or whatever, speeches and stuff like that. You saw that with Martin there down in South the Tip, IFP. But you know, stating the obvious hypocrisy, you'd be called far right, blacklisted, hounded, persecuted, and all of that. Meanwhile, this person fresh off a boat, candidate now, imagine going to some country and not only, like, you get to India or Ukraine or whatever, and you say, oh, there's this funny rule where I can vote. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Like, I'm only here a recent while, I'm a guest. And you say, oh, I'm going to vote. That's already a bit galling, really, right? For obvious reasons. But then if you say, oh, no, not just that, I'm going to stand in the election. I just cannot imagine doing such a thing. And then you openly say that you'd like to be a voice for new communities. So you go, oh yeah, I'm going to be a voice for the people here who the majority of people natives don't want here. but I'm going to be their candidate in your election. It's just crazy that she came out and just said it like that. But so it says a 46-year-old Ukrainian woman will be the first in an estimated 10,000 strong Ukrainian community in County Kerry to run in local elections. Ukrainians living in temporary protection in the state can vote. So temporary protection, these things are effectively like barracks, right? It's not like they just randomly rented and bought houses at their own discretion across the country in some organic fashion. This is like barracks. This is like plantation. And but there's a specific detail that gets to me here. So it says there's been a rush by candidates of all parties to get Ukrainians to register in the various municipal districts. The large Ukrainian community of more than 3,000 in Killarney now have their own candidate. So they don't just, they can vote direct. They don't have to see which one of the Gombeans appeals most to them. They can just go straight to their own guy, their own gal. And there's 3,000 Ukrainians in Killarney. And I looked up the population. So according to the 2022 census, so this would have been before plantation. It's funny, that census is quite useful because it happened just around the point where the special military operation, the Ukraine-Russia war, began. The census night was roughly around then, so it's basically the last moment before this like Uber plantation began happening. So it's good, handy that way. So according to that census, Killarney's population was 14,500. Now, if you have a large Ukrainian community of more than 3,000, and then how many non-Ukrainian foreigners are there, let's say, going to be in Killarney? Other asylum seekers, other plantation people, and then just other more long-standing kind of foreigners, but who still might have an interest in kind of the open borders. They don't want to, like, they're averse to national interest, for obvious reasons. So you could have 3,000 Ukrainians, that's a fact. And then I'm going to kind of speculate and just say maybe you have 3,000 other ones. No, maybe less. Let's say you have 2,000 or 2,000. So another few thousand in other asylum seekers who they might not be Ukrainian, it might be totally alien to Ukrainians, but they share the fact that we're just here and we want the best dole possible. We want the best rights. We want whatever the NGOs are saying. We want like to back them up, you know. The more family reunification, the better. They have completely divergent interests to Derek Bly of Dwyer, someone like me, or you probably. And so you have, a 14,000 Killarney population, probably like 5,000 odd, probably at least half of that would be foreigners with directly divergent interests, most of whom are being directly canvassed by NGOs to register to this, to that, the other. And then of course they're probably being like informed that, like, just by the way, here's a person who believes this thing, maybe you'd want to vote for them. And then if they run a Ukrainian candidate, it doesn't even need to be said, they'll all just go out, like organize the whole thing within their WhatsApps and stuff. We're all definitely going to, they'll be more invigorated to go vote for their person than the average Irish person who might be kind of like, I'll vote Sinn Féin or Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, who cares? Probably maybe won't go vote at all. Like, you know, it's kind of scatty and not invigorated by that same impetus that the Ukrainians would all have. Oh, we have our own Ukrainian candidate running now. They're trying to strip our dole back. Let's run our own gal here. And you just, again, the numbers are so high. Obviously, it's quite possible that this woman could be elected. And so now if you're a person in Killarney who says, I want to appeal to my local councillor and tell them that I'm not happy with the way my town has gone. 10, 15 years ago, our town was mostly Irish, and then the tourism industry separate to that. And it was beautiful and lovely, and it was something we understood. And I just think the idea of having my nation and my local area completely ripped out from under me on the scale of a military invasion, kind of rapidity to it. I just want to humbly suggest to you, my councillor, that I'm sort of against that. So if you could like make that known to the government or take it on board or something like that. You have this woman looking back at you across the table, right? And she's going to look at you like, are you stupid? Come to me with that. I mean, come on, think of the obvious here, right? I obviously don't really give a fuck about you saying that. In fact, you saying that, I'm just going to condemn you and say, oh, you're horrible. All the newspapers and the NGOs are on my side, and you're just done for. It's a very extreme scenario. So I'll read a bit more on that. Just that general story. So I want to get into this Emma Lane Spallin woman, because it's an example of one of these people who are, let's say, highly objectionable in their conduct. So tens of thousands of is this her, or it might be a different one? Yeah. So it's just a recent article about this as well. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians could vote for the first time. Up to 50,000 Ukrainian refugees could be first-time voters in upcoming local elections. Over 105,000 Ukrainians have fled to Ireland since the Russian invasion in 2022. I'm surprised they didn't say the unprovoked Russian invasion. I suppose they've just gotten over that now, because they used to always have to say that. But with around 80,000 are estimated to still be blah blah blah. So it's this, the person they go to spokesperson on this is Emmeline Spollen, national coordinator of the Ukraine Civil Society Forum, said there are around 40 to 50,000 Ukrainian refugees here who could be of voting age, and Ukrainians are politically aware. So this woman is paid, I assume, by the state and other entities. Just reading the chat there, but she's paid to like look into this, all the stats and the breakdown, and make them aware of their right to vote, and like sort of hustle this all together. It's like, this is my point about these people, is like, wait, what mandate does this woman have for all of this? Like, which one of us elected her to do this? So to quote her, she says, the feedback is actually that Ukrainians love to vote. They really find it exciting. Democracy is so fresh for them, and they really enjoy voting. They don't have much democracy now, being, gobbled up by this war, and like democracy is suspended in Ukraine now in this war and regime they seem to love so much. But but at least they can vote here. Yeah, we're kind of hopeful that will translate. So she's enthusiastically trying to get these people in, whatever, and just a bit more on her. So just to give you an idea of the type of person now, right? And again, I always make this point, but while Irish people have to, like a lot of normal Irish people they're not on any NGO or group, or they're not on telly, and they don't have a full-time salary to study stats and benefits and all that stuff. They just have to go grind through their job, come home, some of them working, and have to sleep, come home to their car and sleep in their car, and the rest of it, right? There's a lot of like poverty now among normal people who weren't previously considered indigent or anything like that, and yet now they're living in their car while working, and or they their kids, they're trying to, like, there's stories of people like skipping meals so that their kids can eat. So they'll feed their kids, but they might like have a nibble off the side or something like that, and maybe, oh, I won't eat, I'll eat in the morning, I won't eat. It's like heartbreaking to think about that stuff. And meanwhile, this woman with no mandate, you can assume her nest is fairly well feathered. Just listen to her accent. This video is the substance of what she's saying here doesn't matter. It's just some video of her on telly. But just listen to the accent. This is the type of person you're dealing with. The type of person who has no regard for the majority view, the will of most Irish people, the natural inheritance of a people, of a nation, to the sort of the posterity of their people, of their nation state. That basic concept that has been at play throughout history and remains at play throughout most of the world, but not in Ireland, under the dictatorship of people like this. But just, again, it's regardless of what she's saying, just listen to her accent, just to get an idea of, like, while you're grinding it out, while you're living your normal life, while you're completely disenfranchised and disempowered, this is the type of person who gets to hold court, get fully paid, go on TV, go on the newspaper articles, and the rest of it.
Yeah, so I suppose two things. Yes, emphatically, I believe this is a policy of deterrence. The government does not, and the permanent government would like people to stop coming. They're exhausted, and I fully accept that, and I understand we're working in a really hard context, but we're also working in a global context of enormous, war in Ukraine, Gaza, all around us. There is huge movements of people, and very few are coming to Ireland, and less coming to Ireland than the rest of Europe. And we had less refugees and international protection applicants in Ireland in 2023 than the year before. So the new things, it is about deterrence, and it is really worrying, because
it's really worrying. She reminds me of like a slightly less photogenic sort of version of like Kate Blanchett in Hannah. That's the film with Saoirse Ronan. Niche reference, but if you've seen that, just this kind of, I don't know, this kind of icy sort of snobby tyrant. But just listen to more then. So this is what she thinks of you, right? So Simon Harris, like, he's not great either, but given that the government were cutting the Ukrainian welfare payments, she said Harris accused of pandering to thugs with cuts to Ukrainian welfare payments. Now, the person who's saying that he's pandering to thugs is her. They quote her in the article. Again, they don't quote me. They don't quote you. They don't quote Joe Blogs off the street. She's in article after article, and she gets paid, and the whole rest of it. And she's paid, I'm assuming, largely by the state in some fashion or another, national or multinational. And she's been around. Matt Tracy has an article. I think they calls her like the NGO queen or something like that. Matt Tracy gripped Emma Lane Spallin. You'll kind of find, however you say that in double barrel name, but she's got a whole rap sheet of NGO participation. So, you know, plenty of money has come from somewhere for her. So what does she say? And bear in mind, so she has this high throne, right, to do this against all of it. The vast majority of people would be complete, if they understood and knew about all this, they would be completely against A, what's happening, and B, the fact that she gets to hold court over all this. They would be like, what the fuck is this? Like, how is this possible? And why do I have to live under this sort of gentry or whatever it is, right? And have them dictate the moral, what's not, what should happen, what doesn't. Like, why don't I get the same say as she gets? Like, I mean, that's a basic point, but it's kind of striking even me now as I say it. Like, and I don't mean me, I mean Joe Blogs off the street, or me, or you, or anyone. It's like, well, why do you get all that civil society, democratic participation, or whatever, this kind of voice, and I don't, or some random person doesn't? Like, under what mandate did that actually happen? And of course, she's one of thousands of these people. And here's what she says, right? Because of course she's paying attention to all this stuff, this so-called far-right insurgency, or whatever you call it, going on in Ireland. This kind of shouldn't use the word insurgency, but like this kind of like political rebellion, we'll say. But she says, where do they go to quote her now? So Emma Lane Spallin, national coordinator of the Ukraine Civil Society Forum, of which more than 24 NGOs and community organizations are a part, claimed the only outcome would be to drive people out of Ireland, which she said is the aim of anti-migrant groups who have been accused of inciting fires and escalating protests at the homes of politicians. And then she says, this is such crazy chutzpah here, basically. She says, if I want to be heard, do I need to start burning buildings or picketing the Taoiseach's home? She asked. She has the gall to say, oh, so if I want to be heard, I have to do these things these other things. It's like, oh, what? So you're not heard. You're not heard on every media, on the TV, lambasting the Taoiseach, and being paid wherever you're paid from to do all this as effectively a full-time job, and get to effectively shape policy and how things go. And again, have the whip hand over everyone and this high throne to do it from. And you have the gall to say, oh, do I have to do all these things to get heard? Like, think of how sort of arrogant that is, and just I don't know, seethe on that for a while. It's crazy. It's crazy. And then she says it's a radical thuggish edge which is driving society. So again, this class thing as well, because you did hear her accent. So people who are like you saw in Ballina recently, stopping JCBs, having to stand up into the bucket of a JCB and stop it, and ask migrants for their IDs and things like that. The scenes that are objectively kind of ugly, but they have no other option. They don't get to go on TV. They don't get to advocate. They don't get paid by the state and other funding to have advocacy groups and like she does. So they're left like in these desperate positions. And then she goes, these thugs, thuggish edge. This is not where the majority of people are. Actually, you'd be surprised if you actually looked at a couple of statistics, right? But she's too busy looking at Ukrainian statistics to care about that. So now we get on to this recent thing from Roscrea. Now, this was crazy. It's on the same theme. So it was this woman tweeted. I wasn't aware of it until it just went around online. I might have to blow my nose again. Watch out, lads. Cover your ears. But so she says, this is, when I see this post, I don't know who this is, right? I'm just seeing it out there. She says, I'm wore out registering the thousands of refugees we have in Roscrea to make sure the far right, or whatever title the dimwits can manage to print on their GoFundMe flyers, don't get a look in. They were ran from the town already. They will be again. So she's saying, she's gloating basically. I'm war out registering these thousands of refugees. And when I saw that, I actually texted someone I know in Roscrea, someone I met at the time. I have a couple of numbers. So I just texted one of these people kind of out of nowhere and said, I'll tell you why I texted. Is because when I saw that, I thought it was either an Antifa sort of person just stirring the pot, you know, creating a bit of hype, whatever, or it could be a so-called far-right person, maybe just engaging in the same thing, a bit of pot stirring, a bit of sort of fan fiction. Like I'm going to take the truth of what's happening, but put it through a sock account in the most outlandishly provocative and ugly way in order to make the other side look bad, that type of thing. So, and that's my assumption. I was like, it's 90% that, but I mean, just in case, I'll text this person from Roscrea and say, hey, are you familiar with this Sabrina Doran or this account? Like, is this person, to your knowledge, is this a real person you're aware of? I was expecting her to go, I don't know them, you know. And she says, oh yeah. Tells me, I'll read it out, right? Maybe I should, I don't know, for legal reasons, maybe I should be. She gives me a background. She says, oh, used to work for this and that person, this person who has brought most of the refugees into the town. She was on the Katie Hannon show, la 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 la. So basically, real person, right? I was thinking, oh my, this is crazy. And then what's his name? Peter Madden, who's from around that area as well. He posted about more detail about it. So, and a long story short, she's real. It's real, and so he says this is not a wind up. So again, he had to clear it up because it looks like it's fake. It looks like it's something I would make up for, you know, to support my narrative or something. This is according to him. He says, I know her, Sabrina Doran, employed by the migrant industry contractors in Roscrea town. So not just some random activist taking their own agency, but employed allegedly by the migrant industry contractors. So directly in on it. She's a full-time plantation worker in Roscrea, and thousands are planted in town and local area. I was talking to her in person last week. She said, blah, blah, blah. It was not blah, 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 but, you know, whatever. That's the point made. So, and then there's pictures as well. I don't know if you'll see this very well, but so just kind of evidence. This is like a sort of pensioner-looking kind of woman. So I'm not able to make it large enough for you to see it, I'd say there, really. Maybe you're able to zoom in or something, but point being, it's pictures of her standing around with like random Africans inside in these centers. One of them, the bottom left picture there, if you could see it. Then no, these are grown men in their 20s, 30s. One of them looks like he could be 50. They're sitting around a desk with arts and crafts, like you would do with children, right? And they're making flags with their PVA glue and their paint or whatever. And they're inside in this facility. And again, they don't have to worry about heat or food or any of this stuff, a roof over their head. That's provided by the state with the oversight of this Sabrina woman. And then and then they get to do their activities. Oh, lovely, right? So if you're someone who has to commute 2 hours to work, and then pay loads of tolls on the way, and everything is a grind, everything is more and more money, and it's just a nightmare, really. And like, even though you were comfortable 3-4 years ago financially, now you're like going, am I poor or what? Like, you know, like everything you go buy a few bits in the shop, it costs a fortune. Everything's something you have to think about, you know. And meanwhile, these lads are sitting in the center drawing pictures and hanging out, and they have direct representatives. And it's a kind of a critique of like the democracy thing is completely, like, there needs to be way more said on this in the sense of like democracy as we think of it, which is that everyone gets a say and a participation in the society. That, like, that's completely gone. Like, you still kind of have a vote perfunctory, and maybe in a radical, like, you know, upset, you could yield some result. But the real power in the society is yielded by like the MLA and Spallins and this person. It's basically like certain people are given this right to do all of this activism and effectively political participation. And we'll talk about PPNs in a second. There are a million different agencies and all of this, and people who are paid full salaries to work on all this stuff. And not only are they given the salary, but they're given the access. They get to liaise directly with the government, the real government, not the government like that you would get if you tried to liaise with them. They get direct connections with the civil service, the deep state, so to speak. They get to actually influence how things are going, have a say in it and be involved in it. And everyone else is literally just kind of outside the gates. Again, I would ask the same question. Why does this woman get to participate in this kind of political, not electioneering, whatever the word is when you try to get people in to vote or whatever? She's a political actor, is what I'm saying, and is involved in all these plantations. And according to one lady there I spoke to in Roscrea, she's on the radio, and she's a political agent effectively, or actor. And yet you or me or John off the street, or John or Jane off the street, we have we get our Scaldi ballot, on the day, which is already overwhelmed by Ukrainians anyway. And so it's just totally rigged. It's like, why, again, what is the reason that they get to be this sort of I don't know what it is. What do you even call it? Like, I'm thinking a gentry or something like that, like a political gentry, maybe something like that. Again, what's the logic? What's the actual dynamic, stated dynamic on who gets to participate? And it is well studied. It's called civil society. It's like a post-World War II sort of complex for the entire West, because it's the same story in Australia and Canada and US. It's called civil society, and that's a euphemism for basically disempowering the masses and handing control and power to a certain chosen people, so to speak, for this. And again, I'm not calling anyone, this lady in front of me or the other one, I'm not calling anyone specifically a traitor for legal reasons, we'll say. But I did call this video "Rule by Traitor." And it's kind of like, and Morgoth's Review, he's a YouTuber. He did videos on this years ago analyzing the kind of psychological aspect of it, which is that under this system, with all its mechanisms, NGOs, you could go on about all that stuff. But if you boil it down, what it is that you're completely disempowered. And then at the same time, the power in kind of diffuse and hard to understand ways, covered in euphemisms, power over you and power over the society is kind of distributed out amongst to a certain class, and it's distributed out to the most sort of treacherous people among you, the lowest grade, the most wicked, nasty, non-solidaristic, if that's a word, no sense of justice or fairness or like, do I have a right to do what I'm doing? Any of this stuff, like the most nasty, wicked sort of scum around you. If you've seen Game of Thrones, there's that whole story narrative around this guy Reek. The idea of having this sort of lurching cretin, like a Schmiegel type figure, given sort of like the keys and the baton within the gulag, and they're the prison officer, and you're not just ruled by random people, you're ruled by the most debased, snaky, serpentine, reptilian people possibly among you. So it's almost like, and it's the same in a way for the politicians. However the politicians end up being elevated, it is a case where it's not just that you're not ruled by the best people, or you're ruled by mediocre people who are somewhat amoral. It's almost like, in an evolutionary Darwinistic fashion, whatever you call this system, this rule by traitor, this civil society, post-World War II political dynamic, it's like it has a way of selecting with ruthless efficiency for the most amoral scumbags within your society. So if you specifically went out and God gave you carte blanche to say, I'm going to omnisciently find the most treacherous people I possibly can to be the politicians, to be the NGO people, to be all of these administrators, those will be elevated, and anyone else throughout this process who has a shred of decency or any of that, they will be completely like filtered out, wheat in the chaff. They will be chaff out. At some stage they'll be noticed and put out, and at the top then you will have this purified, this thing of like pure treason. And that's kind of what it does. It's not an accident. It's not just the nature of political participation that it ends up that way. You know, it's not. In places like China and Iran, these places that are meant to be boogeymen, and other regimes throughout history, you'd have a mix. You have people who are sort of friendly with the industrialists, and you know they're kind of greedy and whatever. But you have a mixed bag. On the other hand, you have real patriots, nationalists, people with a sense of justice, national pride. They want to see their place develop and do well. They care about their people. They want to do the right thing. It's a mix. It's a mix. That's human nature. You'll always have some corruption and exploitation. But in the West, all that you have are people who are willing to put on a suit or whatever they put on and do the worst things to the people around them and whatever the people who are giving them the money and the power tell them to do. And they're actually actively, for some psychological reason, they actively have a hostility towards their people. Some people would almost do it for free. It's just the power they want. And yeah, I was thinking about this looking at your one, because like, think of her original message here. She's doing this, and not only is she given all this power, doing this, speaking openly, she uses the word far right, but what she's saying is anyone who's against this process in the town, she's saying, not only am I engaged in doing this process to you, which you don't really want, but I'm doing it with the backing of the state, basically, and involved with them. And not only that, but once it's done, I'm going to then turn around and empower, or sort of try to enfranchise these migrants to vote as a bloc. She's implying that herself within the message. And then the last layer, which is obscene, which is that not only will she do all that, it'd be one thing if someone did all that for their weird reason. They're paid, they're hostile, they're just horrible. But the last layer is that she doesn't just do that quietly and, you know, rub her hands together in the evening at home. She then says, oh, no, I'm going to tell them. I'm going to tell them exactly what I'm doing, and I'm going to laugh and rub it in their faces. Say, here's exactly, you don't have to have a conspiracy theory. Here's exactly what I'm doing, what my motivation for it is. You know who I am. You know I work in the center, and I'm doing all that to you. You can't do anything about it. I can do what I like, right? I can do what I like. I'll go on the radio. I'll get paid. I'll be in the center. I'll do the whole thing. And I'm just going to say, haha, I'm openly telling you what I'm doing, and there's fuck all you can do about it, because I have the power and you don't. And you're going to be driven down further, and I'm going to do it. It's like the idea that they're able to just put it in your face like that. Emma-Lane Spaulding a bit more, she's not as open. She kind of is, but she's not as gaudy about it. But she's effectively doing the same thing, really, right? And so is this woman. And again, it's like, okay, so we're just ruled by these people. Like the majority of us are kind of against this. You see this on a town level, national statistical level. We're against it. And yet this is what this random person who, I mean, talk about a person who isn't popular. Like if she were just like part of the local community, say what you like about Shane Lee, but at least people there kind of like him. He's probably down the gap pitch, you know, and buys points for people. Even Lowry, like they're scumbags, but they have some sort of local panache to them or whatever. Whereas this person wouldn't even get like inside the pub, you know, probably completely unlikable, I'm guessing, and weird. And yet she's got power over the whole town. She's got more power than Shane Lee does. I criticize Shane Lee and I criticize Lowry, but in a way, she's kind of almost got, because they're just kind of grifters and gombeans in their own way, but it's almost like she's got directly more political power in a sense, like real political power than they do. And it's just fucked up basically. But there's more of this kind of stuff. So I want to tell you a bit. I spoke in a stream a few weeks ago kind of about this, and I kind of got to it. I kind of talked about it. But then afterwards, after the stream, I got off and I said to myself, I didn't really put that together very well. Like I didn't have the facts. I didn't go back over the history and get it together well enough. I kind of came up with the idea as I was streaming, and then I put it together better afterwards. And I thought, oh, that would have been, if only I could redo that stream. So what I'm going to do is just kind of give you a quick bit on this. It's the history. It's another one of these NGO tyrants. Her name is Sarah Clancy, and it was in Lisdoonvarna, and it's the perfect kind of story in 4 parts that fully encapsulates this. The type of person I'm talking about, strongly objectionable behavior or whatever. The kind of person I'm talking about, and you have to look at it and go, wait, how sustainable is it to live in a society where this person has complete power to do what they do with impunity? Like, this is not like this. It's untenable. You know, how can you have this? And it is systematic. They're nasty people, but then they're empowered. Like, if it wasn't them, it would be someone else, type of thing. So let me just show you. So, and I'll give you my blurb on it. I said, it requires a bit of focus and attention as a tweet, but I'm talking to you, so I'll do the work on explaining it. But it puts our current predicament into context by showing exactly how the plantation sausage is made and how we are being systematically replaced and disenfranchised in our own communities and country. So just have a go off this, right? So the dates matter here. So this was in March 1st, 2018. So 6 years ago, more than 6 years ago. I'm in Lisdoonvarna. I go to this town meeting. The majority of the people at this meeting are ordinary. You can tell by looking at them, they're just ordinary Joe soaps in from the town. And they've showed up in big numbers to this on a blizzard night, right? They've shown up. No politicians have really shown up. They're meant to, obviously, for a big town meeting like this. No politicians really show up. The Gombeen hotelier, who's very questionable character, Marcus White, has told people that, well, if the town don't want it, then I won't do it. And I'll attend the meeting. Now, he ends up doing it anyway, and he doesn't attend the meeting. He says he can't go because of inclement weather. And as far as I know, he's just up the town. I actually came from Cork and went to Dublin after that. So I did it for free. He's the guy on trial here or whatever, and he couldn't go. So you basically have no politicians there, and you have no Gombeen. So who is there? It's just all the people there getting together kind of by themselves, you would imagine. There's this one guy there, his name is Paddy, funnily enough, Paddy something or other. And he's like a local man. He'd be down at the under-12s match probably cheering on the lads and, you know, I don't know, maybe onto the Tidy Town thing. He's a real deal kind of local sort of fella to be around. You know those fellas, right? And like, I don't know, he'd be in the WhatsApp group, and if someone said, oh, that pothole's getting bigger, he might say, oh, I'll mention it to the councillor. Sort of like this unofficial sort of point man or whatever. And he's, I'll be honest, naive, you know, bumbling type of fella or whatever. So he's kind of like the holding court in there a little bit, because if he's not, then no one is, and it's kind of totally rudderless. So he's kind of holding court. There's a mic there. He's speaking. And then what I noticed throughout this meeting is that there's these two women who, over the course of the meeting, sort of become like, it becomes a three-way thing. Sorry, unfortunate term, but where it's him and it's these two ones, and increasingly they're more heading it than he is. There's Teresa O'Donoghue who is one of them, and then there's Sarah Clancy as the other. And as far as I know, to begin with, I'm going, I don't know, there's your man and these two women, three people from the town, whatever. They've got a natural leadership quality. They're up there. And then, of course, I very quickly start to spot one of them has kind of Dublin accent. The other has another sort of accent, and they seem, I've been around the NGO type of crowds and like college crowds, and I know this stuff, obviously. I'm a critic of it, so I know it. It becomes patently, viscerally clear to me quite quickly, like, I'm like, who are they? What's the crack there? And they're talking away and they're saying stuff like, oh yeah, we appreciate it's not right what's happening. You don't have the services. I understand where you're coming from, and I'll be opposing it too. I'll be writing to the minister along with Paddy, and don't worry, we're all going to take care of it. Three of us up here type of thing. That's Teresa. She's kind of heading it with him. And then Sarah Clancy comes in as a kind of guest speaker. And I'm going, okay, I don't know the Sarah Clancy. She gets up and she starts talking about how she's familiar with migrants and she works around them, and she says that direct provision is really bad, so she opposes it just like the town does. I just don't think it's right. They're being put into the centre, and because the town are, like everyone in the West, is cooked out by the political tyranny, they kind of will lean towards that because they think, well, I don't want to say I just don't want a lot of foreigners here. It's better if I say, oh, it's not fair on the asylum seekers or whatever, anything I can do to just oppose this. So your one Clancy is there to gobble that up and say, oh yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm from the Clare PPN, and I'm here to say I agree with you, and I'll write to the minister. Me and Teresa and Paddy as well. Yeah, we're all going to write to them. And so they're, as far as I'm concerned, railroading the two of them, and they know each other. It's quite clear these are two total NGO heads, and they're railroading the meeting. And of course, no normal person in there is necessarily equipped to spot this. although some of them do. I whispered to a couple of people, who's there? And they went, I don't know who she is, like, you know, that kind of thing. And people, you know, being like, it's like a bit of a stitch up, but like, there's no one's actually rebelling, like. And I actually went up to Teresa O'Donoghue because I had messaged Paddy beforehand to say I was going to go and stuff, and he said, "Oh, I'll introduce you to your own now up." I said, "Hi, what's your name?" And she immediately, I don't know, was it some sort of visceral thing? she knew or something. She went icy on me straight away. She was like, "Who are you?" And I went, I was like, "Oh, I'm Garrett Murphy. I'm just down here kind of covering it." And she was like thrown by it, you know. This kind of like, are you covering it? What do you mean? You know, and I was kind of coming to her to be like, hey, who are you? You know, so there was this immediate thing. Then afterwards, basically over the course of like a week, I went away and I figured out, okay, Sarah Clancy, Teresa, who are these people? Mapped it all out, grabbed all the screenshots of them from the Facebook pages. There started to be this kind of like battle, PR war between like me and them, where they're inside of all the Lisdoonvarna Facebook groups already, and they're saying this Garrett Murphy person showed up and he's far right, and don't talk to him. And if anyone else comes to the town and wants to talk to townspeople, tell them not to talk to them. And if anyone comes into the pubs, tell them to be wary because it's far right agitated. They started going like that. So it was insane what was going on. And Sarah Clancy was asking Rory McKiernan to help her, and then he said he was going to get people and hackers and Twitter colleagues to get details on. It went mad. It was crazy, right? That whole sort of PR war or whatever, because they weren't used to the idea that someone would come in. This is before we had the current incarnation of the so-called far right. This was early days. So this was new to them. Someone coming in, speaking to them face to face, and then afterwards popping up online and busting them. They were like, you know, I'm being attacked by the far right. That's what their narrative was. We're being attacked. We're being harassed and all this. There's no harassment of any sort. But that's kind of what went on. That was that first night. I'm there. And as I said at the time, I said, it's very prescient, really. It's kind of like I didn't know the crack back then. I said, last night, Lisdoonvarna voted on an agenda to place 115 migrants in their small town of 300. 197 said no, 15 yes, right? How many of them were NGOs? So basically everyone opposed it. I said a near unanimous rejection. Excuse me, Jesus. I'm like, you're getting all my, you know, nose and lung noises tonight, so enjoy. But I said a near unanimous rejection that in a sane world would send a message to Dublin, Brussels and beyond. The question now, will they be listened to? Well, we know well now in the fullness of history, they certainly weren't listened to. I had a feeling they wouldn't be. So that was that night. That's how it started. And that's how it sort of, I discovered these two operatives, as far as I was concerned, doing this, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. So a community meeting, speaking to my civil society tyranny that we have, a small little community meeting in Lisdoonvarna, the back of Clare, right? A small little hall. People are, you know, they're after having their not to be like stereotypical, but they're after coming in from work. They're after feeding the dog, taking him for a walk, you know, do the homework with the kids, throw on a couple of hash browns and eat them, and then go out to this community meeting. You know, they're like going, I'm not a political participant. I'm not that type of person. I just live my own life, you know. But this thing has happened. I go out to it, and they go there, and in the middle of effectively a blizzard in the dark black west of Clare, there are these two women in the fucking hall, and not just in the hall, but up on the mic, telling people that they're representing them. And that's what I discovered. I was like, this is insane. This is a perfect typification of this whole NGO industry, what's going on in civil society, that it actually runs, it's that efficient, that it runs that deep, right into the roots, right down. You know, you'd struggle to see a China or a Russia having something as ruthlessly efficient and totalitarian as that. But alas, that's what it was. Just a side point as well. Teresa O'Donoghue, she was so like rattled by the whole thing. You know, they're harassing me. There was all I ever did was challenge them in the political space, right? You know, challenge them, and you know, if I had defamed them, they could have sued me. If I defamed them now, they could sue me, right? But I have the receipts for all of this stuff. So, the funny thing is, Teresa O'Donoghue went off and wrote a book. One of you, if you want to, you can look up Teresa O'Donoghue Lisdoonvarna book. She was in the Clare Echo, and all the newspapers gave her carte blanche to promote her book. During this whole saga, her and Clancy were in the local newspapers all the time, getting a blank check to write whatever they wanted. spin the narrative. They were on RT, they were on primetime, like, and even when primetime did pieces on Lisdoonvarna, when they went to like, oh, what do local people and leaders or people who are going to talk think about it? They would be up inside in the centre folding clothes for refugees going, oh, yeah, it's not right what's happening. I see how the town oppose it. But like, you know, so it was just all out there. And but she wrote a book on it. And I remember saying, like, you know, when you trigger the libs so hard, they write a book about it. I thought it was kind of funny. I consider that rather an achievement. Did one of you just say blah, blah, blarney? If you're accusing me of rambling, there's a lot of people here to listen to my rambles. So anyone who says that gets banned. That's how it is. Because you can either listen to it or you can fuck off. That's my view. But so anyway, so that was that. That was March 1st, 2018. So then, and the dates kind of matter here. So then I went in on March the 9th. So what's that? Like a week odd later. I actually go back to, because I go home, or no, I go to Dublin, ride out the blizzard in a hotel actually for 4 nights. It was great. And I'm dwelling on this the whole time. You know, looking into everything I can look into, posting, the PR war and all that. And I figured out these two women. I figured out the whole agenda going on. And so, and at this point, I actually don't think I've mentioned them too much publicly. I'm not sure. But anyway, I go back a week later to Lisdoonvarna because I've heard about this PPN. Clancy works for this PPN thing, and the PPN were involved in this. And I realized that they're this state-funded, largely state-funded community representation group. And I realized that, well, they're community representation in the sense that, yeah, you have this town meeting, and then you have this person, alien, kind of like dropped in as a state representative, the state liaising with the state, basically against the interests of the real community. So it's like, it calls itself a public participation network, but again, in classic Orwellian fashion, it's the take public participation network. It's the exact opposite of all those words, right? That's what it really is. So I start studying this PPN. I have issues about it, I have questions, and I go along to it. It's funny. I have this little book at the time, and I write out my questions, and I just basically, and I'm not a confrontational person really. Like I generally get along with people okay if they're not really weird. But I go into this headquarters. They have this little office somewhere, you know, and I call in and I go, hey, I'm just here. I saw their public participation network was involved in this Lisdoonvarna thing. I just want to ask a few questions. I'm just kind of covering it. I'm like, you know, independent journalist. And so I kind of get through on that. Like no one, they go, okay, give me a sec, I'll call someone. And so this woman comes out. I don't think I recognized her. I don't know. She must have been dressed differently or something. But I sit down and I have these questions for her. And I try to play it kind of nice, basically, in that, like, I don't want to be doing necessarily a filled wire type of thing. That's just not me. So I go in and I just say, I'm going to ask, I think this might be the Sarah Clancy. I'm not sure. Sit down with her. And I think, I don't want to be confrontational. I just want to put my point sincerely. Like, why is this organization representing people, but it doesn't really agree with their interests, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Who are they paid by? What's the crack here? And so I have these questions. I never get to put them because I end up going off on a spiel. I end up basically not putting the questions directly, but sort of starting a conversation. And I'm polite, and she's nice. She's getting on to me, like, in the sense that she thinks I am a nice guy, but like she takes it me as such. And so I'm like, yeah, I just have a couple of questions. She's like, oh yeah, sit away down. And I'm like, okay. So we sit down. And I'm like, oh, you know, I was up there and, you know, the meeting was going on and blah, blah, blah. And I have these questions. So I'll just read them out to you. It was a very surreal event, really, if only it was like recorded. I said, the plan was leaked on the 28th of February. When did the Clare PPN or members of its secretariat know? So I'm just kind of saying, the plan was leaked to like the Lisdoonvarna public on a certain date. Did Clare PPN know 2 weeks in advance, or what's the story? Like, do you have an inside track? Like when you come down expressing solidarity with the people of Lisdoonvarna or something like that, well, did you know about it independently? Like, who are you and what's the story? Then I said, there's this group called Lisdoonvarna Friends of Asylum Seekers. I said, what are the funding or grants for that, if any? How long has this group existed? So did it exist? Friends of Asylum Seekers, did it come into being 2 months ahead of any news being leaked at all? So like, is this an inside op, basically? Then I said, in the Lisdoonvarna meeting on the 28th of February, why was only one speaker invited to open up the evening? This was before the vote, a person selling the virtue of accepting migrants, Sarah Clancy. And then it's like, oh, she's sitting in front of me. And why was she trying to repeatedly reframe the discussion to one about the system of direct provision itself? It said, what is the purpose of Clare PPN? Why are its members secretariat cooperating with Eugene Banks and the RAA, with the government? And where does Clare PPN get its funding? Does it receive EU funding of any kind? Are you voluntary or paid? So I never really get to ask the questions, because I only get to the point where I say a lot of people are worried about the town being like, overrun, and that's what people say. And I'm being very balanced. I'm even saying it. I'm not saying that, but there are people in the town who say they don't want their town to be overrun. That's what some people are saying. And immediately I use wrong speak, and she completely seizes up, because it's almost like I'm sort of giving credence to that a little bit, even from a secondary perspective. She completely seizes up and goes into freak mode, and she's like, basically goes, yeah, we're done here, basically. And I'm like going, well, thanks for talking to me, see you. And I just leave, and that's it. And of course, that was spun to, like, all the Antifas and stuff were saying afterwards, this man called into a woman's office and tried to say he's like a woman harasser or something. And even she herself, after the fact, said he was actually really nice in person. It was funny, they could, doing that. But that's how that went. So I was basically not allowed to say, I was like the truest form of a journalist you could possibly imagine, not paid, not connected to anyone, doing something independently of the narrative. And I'm going into a public institution, state funded, and I'm saying, I have some difficult questions for you. Isn't that what Peter Parker and all that, isn't that the whole narrative we're sold about? That's the truest form of journalism, but no, completely iced out. And then suddenly it's Rory McKiernan with Twitter and the hacking community, and it's NGOs galore pouncing on it. So that was then fast forward. So that all was what it was. Then now let's fast forward from March 2018 to August 2022, a few years on now, right? So I fought that battle. I tried to stand up for the people there who were like, not like sheep and calling them stupid, but sheep in the sense of scattered, leaderless, scared, that kind of thing, right? So I tried to help a community in that nature against this big power structure that I was well on my way to understanding. And I tried to help them, and largely did raise awareness, but they got planted, right? And then 4 years later, it's not funny actually, but 4 years later, the articles are coming out saying the Irish town with such a big heart that Ukrainians now outnumber locals. Which, of course, it's not that they have a big heart. They voted against it. They were completely subverted from the inside out. And these people were brought in under Garda escort in coaches to Lisdoonvarna, and that's all she wrote, right? And now they're saying the Irish town with such a big heart. So they're putting the spin is there now. So it's like, oh, isn't Lisdoon? You're wonderful, Lisdoonvarna. We beat you up basically, and now you're a good little thing in your victim. You're a good little victim, right? So such a big heart that Ukrainians now outnumber locals. Now that's not that foreigners outnumber locals. Ukrainians, just them, never mind the other ones, outnumber locals. So the biggest group in Lisdoonvarna are not Irish people, it's Ukrainians. And Lisdoonvarna, like local Irish people in Lisdoonvarna, are a third of their population. That's what came of the efforts of this Clancy woman, Theresa Donoghue, and the whole state that they were effectively working for, I would say. PPN is a state affiliated agency, right? And partially funded. So that's that. So now you're left. So it's not just now our majority status has been reduced from 70% to 60%. No, you've been completely invaded and planted. Like there's no other way you can understand that in the space of a few years for that to happen to a town. And it was done via subversion and Garda and state power and all that. And then fast forward again to May 2024. So recently. So now Sarah Clancy, after her original stint, she's back. So she's putting in, like, this is a person who is committed, whether paid and whether it's motivation of money or just spite or whatever it is, she's that motivated that she's on this town hard, right? So after all that, she's back in 2024. After that's been done to Lisdoonvarna, she shows up again with probably her clipboard and her little pamphlets and her team of translators or whatever, and they're all there, funded by the state largely. And after all they've done, and without any shame, apparently, they show up. So voter drive underway, and the bits I've highlighted. This voluntary initiative will include visits to emergency accommodation, direct provision centres and daycare services in Clare. And people who have migrated to Clare from other countries, including those from Ukraine, those seeking international protection. Now, again, it's not just people who have migrated, like the way you had a Dutch guy living in Lisdoonvarna maybe in 1979, or whatever, a couple of foreigners here and there. Some fella you're aware of, he lives a few miles out the road, this one guy or whatever. That'd be migrants, and that migrant has a right to vote, sure, whatever. This isn't just some migrants who just happen to live or have moved to the area. This is an industrial plantation. They went from being at least a large majority portion of their town just a few years ago to being a third of their population, and Ukrainians being the biggest population, who were living in industrial accommodation units with all their services provided for, and an insular military barracks grade of plantation community. That's not migrants. What is it? People who have migrated. This is not just a person here who migrated. This is different to that, right? So it's like you have state actors who are going to this state plantation and saying, by the way, you can vote, you can run, what your interests are. I'm not going to necessarily tell you on the record who to vote for, but like, I think we all know the crack here. You're not going to vote for, if there's a Lisdoonvarna candidate who comes out and says, I'm against what's happening to Lisdoonvarna, we have to stop it, it's not fair, we're second-class citizens, we're being made a minority, we're only going to be more demonized and more replaced, we have to save Lisdoonvarna. He goes up to, how's he going to get elected with a third of the population, and there's no big voter drive for them, state funded, but there is for these asylum seekers. Like, you're in a position there of effectively like complete military defeat, like systematized military defeat, organized and systematized and effective, complete military grade destruction of your, if you consider invasion and plantation as such, of your town. And the key thing, complete disenfranchisement. So in the same way as a random Joe who was in that meeting didn't have the power that Sarah Clancy had, they didn't have a fraction of the power, a scintilla of the power that Teresa Donoghue, Sarah Clancy had, because that's the way it's organized. They didn't have the power then, and now their measly slip of paper in a ballot box, that's effectively null and void now as well. So it's like, what are you? Are you a citizen? Are you a person? Are you a member of a nation state? No, you're gone. You and your people are now in this area, gone, done, signed, sealed, and delivered. And when you look at the history of this, I don't want to, I'll put it this way, like it's hard to look at the persistence of someone like Clancy over these years with these different things going on from start to finish and think, well, maybe she considers it good, migrants are good or whatever. But when you see what happened from start to finish with Lisdoonvarna, I have a negative perspective on it. She might have some other spin, but it's hard to see that, oh, well, maybe she from the start just bumbled from one thing to the other. Is it not the case that it comes across that she, in being involved in this from start to finish, has a complete awareness, such as I do, of what she herself is doing? Like, she's not, I'm speculating, my perception is that it seems like she is as cognizant of what she is doing as I am of what she's doing, if you know what I mean, which is an extraordinary thing. So that's what they're doing. And then you see Clare PPN coordinator, Public Participation Network, coordinator Sarah Clancy said, along with all other community work colleagues, we're reaching out in particular to people who might not know they're entitled to vote in local elections. Anybody over 18 and living in Ireland is entitled to vote in local elections, regardless of their citizenship status. Wonderful. I mean, yeah, so that's kind of the end of that point. That whole thing of, like, if you think about this, Sabrina Doran in Roscrea, you've Sarah Clancy here, you have Emmeline Spallin. Like, how can we live under this? How can we, like, the only way we can live under this system, and it's the politicians and it's these people who are effectively more nefarious really than the politicians in a sense, because they're the ones right down on the ground making it all happen, and who appear to know exactly what they're doing, and be completely persistent and dedicated to it. Like, how can you live under that as a citizen who might want to oppose that, who might like your nation state, you might be in a majority viewpoint in the country, and yet this is what we're under. It's complete, it's slaved, it is full on. I'm not exaggerating when I say it's like a military occupation, and when I say it's like we are slaves under the most like cruel and ruthlessly efficient and effective totalitarian regime. I'm not at all exaggerating or embellishing. That is exactly how I feel about it, and I only wish I had better words to put that effect on. I don't. That to me, that doesn't even come. It's more actually outlandish than whatever those words can convey. That's how I feel about it. But let's just go on to something. Everything kind of rolls into the next. It's a slight segue, but it's a different story. So this is the story of the state thing here. So the High Court told state failed to meet obligations to asylum seekers. So I'll just read the article. This is RTE. So the High Court has been told that it's absolutely clear that the state has failed to meet its obligations. Well, it's kind of repeating words, but state has failed to meet its obligations to meet the basic needs of unaccommodated international protection applicants, whether or not they were street homeless. I will read a lot of it because it's kind of all relevant. The court has begun hearing the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission's case against the state over the failure to provide accommodation to all those seeking asylum here. So basically, the state is being taken to court by a state-funded NGO. So again, why am I not an NGO? Why are you not an NGO? Why aren't we taking the state to court? Pulling in on some law. I'm sure we could find some law that they're breaching and what they do in these towns, Newtown, Mount Kennedy, and all of that. Surely, why don't I have a what's it called? The Irish Rights Commission, right? Funded to a tune of whatever it is by the state, millions. Why? Again, and whether it's me or whether it's Joe on the street, like, why don't we have that? And they do. Again, you know the answer, but so on December 4th, the state announced it could no longer provide accommodation. We all know the crack, right? They started falling apart at the seams. They started sending them up to like the south of Dublin, to the Wicklow Mountains, basically. And they would go back to the tents and building fences, ironically, outside the International Protection Centre and across the canals in South Dublin, the Grand Canal. And they were basically, disposing of tents, clearing the tent sites, and then handing them free tents again to go pitch them somewhere else, and then repeating the process over and over. I don't know. But it's referring to that. So senior counsel for the commission, Owen McCullough, told the High Court that a failure to provide international protection applicants with material reception conditions, including accommodation, was a breach of the applicant's rights under Article 1 of the EU's Charter of Fundamental Rights. So these obligations are, this is him speaking, he says, these obligations are not one of reasonable endeavours. These are mandatory obligations. So it's not that you can say, well, look, we did everything we could. It's a capacity issue. We really stretched it. We're pepper spraying people in Newtown, Mount Kennedy. We're turning every building we can find into a plantation centre, and just we couldn't handle it. He says, no. Reasonable endeavours aren't an excuse. These are absolute mandatory obligations. You have to. And this is just an obvious point I want to make here, which is like, okay, so you have a mandatory obligation to accommodate asylum seekers. An asylum seeker can basically be anyone who's not Irish, particularly not European, ideally. And any of them can apply for asylum in Ireland. And when they do apply for asylum, as we know, they get appeal after appeal after appeal, and a lot of them get it anyway. But in effect, once you plant yourself here, there's very little, you get in there and within one day they tell you to go home because you're obviously Georgian or you have no evidence or any of this stuff. It's effectively open to anyone, and the criteria are more or less null and void. There are no criteria, just once you're not Irish or European. So in effect, it's open to the entire world, and there's basically very little barrier. Anyone can show up here. So 20 people could show up to Ireland tomorrow, many more than that will, but could show up to Ireland, mouth the word asylum at some airport or international protection office, and they go through the system, and they, if they want to, with NGO instruction, playing the game, they can be here in sort of perpetuity. Now, that could be 20. In reality, it'll be hundreds. But it could be 500,000. In theory, 500,000 people tomorrow could make from poor countries. They might not be war-stricken or any, but the very poor countries that it's understandable why you would maybe make that move from their rational perspective. They go from Somalia, or they go from Gambia, or Philippines, you name it, anywhere. They all come here tomorrow, 500,000 of them, I don't know, whatever the maximum plane capacity, boat capacity is to come in here tomorrow, they all come here, and the same the next day. Your man is effectively saying, based on his silly law, right? There's a law for everything if they want to, and then they can ignore the ones they want to as well. But a state-funded agency is pressing the matter on this law that it's absolute. So again, if thousands upon thousands of people in every day come in here, we'll say in 1 month, 50,000 people come to Ireland, right? Get into Ireland. And he's saying that no, it is completely non-negotiable. The state has to accommodate all of them as a matter of crucial importance, and non-negotiability. It's like, one of those things where it's hard for me to even respond to that. It's like, and again, if we had our own agencies, if Irish people had rights too, if we had civil society, if we had NGOs, if we had political participation networks, if we had any of this, we could all state the obvious. Listen, we're members of a nation state. We have rights. There are capacity limits anyway, regardless of your views. And so this is nonsense. We can't actually, I don't care what they said in the 1951 convention and in the 50 million adjustments they've made to that, which China doesn't do, Singapore doesn't do, Indonesia and India largely don't do. What are we at? Half the world's population now. Africa, lots of South America, Cuba, Bhutan, Myanmar, to a huge extent, Russia. I mean, like, you're talking most of the planet here. Don't do it anyway. So, like, we should be able to challenge these people without having to stand in front of JCBs and towns. We should be able to be in the forum here and challenge this and say, well, no, we're state-funded too. We're in the court as well. And I'm telling you now that there are other rights than international rights. There are national rights. There are national obligations. And those are actually superior to any international rights. And that's the basis that most of the world historically has operated under, and most of the world currently today operates under. So you have no mandate. This makes no sense. And what you're talking about is nonsense. You're trying to stand there in a suit or whatever in front of a guy in a wig and tell us that because you've pulled some EU law out, not even our own nation's law, that we have to accommodate an unlimited amount of people. Like, if you were to say to him, okay, if that's the case, then give me the maximum amount of asylum seekers the Irish state should, the upper number that the Irish state can receive in any given period of time, a day, a month, a year, whatever. There has to be some, I mean, name it. Is it 5,000? Is it 2 million? You can go anywhere. Is it 2 or 2 million? I'll give you complete carte blanche. Just throw a ballpark number at me. I mean, I'm assuming they would follow through and say, no, there is no limit. They would be open about that. So it's like, okay, so you have a whole world which is largely more poor than Ireland, who would want to come here. And you're telling us that this small island nation has an unqualified obligation to house and provide the needs of all these people, especially while our own people suffer with the cost of fuel and food and everything else. You're telling us that with a straight face, and you're trying to tell me that you're an esteemed member of the Gentry, and I'm some sort of depth groveler. How does that make sense? That's some sort of slavery. And you work for a state-funded agency with our taxes, and you get to say all this, and you're legitimate and we're not. What is this? What kind of system is this? Same with Sarah Clancy and with Sabrina Doran and the rest of them, Emmeline Spaulding and senior counsel. He's just a law person, but the people who work for this Equality Commission or whatever that we pay for. So he goes on. Just goes on like so. But there's a tweet here that I thought was good. Now, look, I don't have sources for what this person claims, but let's just run with it. If it's factually wrong, someone can question it after. He says, the €7 million taxpayer-funded Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission has sued Roderick O'Gorman's asylum department for failing to provide accommodation to asylum applicants. So much taxpayer money will be incinerated on both sides at the High Court from 11 a.m. today. And he goes on to say, this is his figure, but the case will probably cost the state around 2 million in legal costs on both sides. So state versus state, millions and millions and millions on this ridiculous concept of free accommodation for foreigners, unlimited, basically, in this small country that's really, really struggling, obviously. And then he goes on to say, for years, Dublin City Council handed out sleeping bags to homeless Irish. Where was the IHREC then? And that's a fact. we all know in cities that they would give a sleeping bag. Where do you think all these homeless people or whatever in Ireland, Irish ones, they're showing up in sleeping bags in Phoenix Park all over the city. They can't get a place tonight and all that. How many cases have there been? And your man painstakingly goes through all the different ways in which the people's needs weren't met. No such unqualified right for Irish people. The hypocrisy of like there being this international obligation for a potential world of 8 billion people, but for the few people who are actually from here, there's not only is there no right, but there's no agency, state-funded agency, to push on that right. It just doesn't exist. There is no equivalent Sarah Clancy, Emmeline Spallin, Sabrina Doran, or Owen McCullough, or anyone else. This is a slave plantation, really. But shall I go on? So this is just like, that's my theme for tonight, kind of talked about. But I just want to look at some of the politicians. So I wanted to talk about the people who matter, these NGOs, these various actors, these terrible people. But meanwhile, you have your Gambins inside.
They will be the business people, they will be the employers, they will be the employees, they will.
I'll only play you like 20 seconds of this, the bit that matters at the start. He's telling a bunch of Muslims in a mosque how they are the future of this country. Isn't that wonderful?
They will be the business people, they will be the employers, they will be the employees, they will be the fabric of this town and of this county. And I appreciate that very much. And if you hadn't made the decision to come here and rear your families here, we would have been denied the right of having those children.
Okay, can't listen to that anymore. But now, do you see what I mean about, like, I won't, for legal reasons, call Michael Healy-Rae a traitor, but you see what I mean about rule by traitor. It doesn't matter who you elect. It doesn't matter what kind of community meeting you have. It'll be steered anyway. You're not in control. You're not funded. You're not empowered. You don't get to take court cases. You don't get any of that. You only get persecuted if you advocate the opposite. These are your politicians. Again, the average Joe off the street. Most people are somewhat opportunistic. They're somewhat not willing to do the brave act. They're somewhat not willing to stick their head above the parapet, all that. That's ordinary. That's human nature. People are a mixed bag. In general, probably kind of craven and weak, and making sure they're comfortable themselves and making sure their life is uncomplicated and understandable, right? Most people are like that to some extent. They want to have a nice kitchen. They want to have a nice car, all that. So that's the basics, level. But the thing is, to even take someone like that who'd be pretty malleable, pretty go along to get along, if you grabbed an average person like that in off the street and you said, I need you to go to Lisdoonvarna and do this meeting where you're going to basically run rings around them. And then you're going to come back 6 years later when they're a total minority, and then you're going to get in there and give all these migrants a vote. Not give them a vote, but remind them of their vote. You're going to do all that, and you're going to sign, seal, and delivered. You're going to do that. The average Joe I'm talking about, who you would bring in to do that, would just be like, I'm not going to be some martyr for a cause or anything, but I'm not going to do that either. I'm sorry, no. You're grand, right? No, I just don't want to do that. Same with Emmeline Spallin. Same certainly with Sabrina Doran. And the same is true as well for Michael Healy-Rae. Most people, if you said your job now is to get up in front of these Muslims and tell them that their people are the future, and it is kind of unfortunately under state policy, that's true, but you're responsible for that, and now you're going to sort of celebrate it with them. And then you're going to whisper out the other side of the ear to some granny you talk to who's against immigration and say, oh, those Bestrels up in the dial, they've no regard for the ordinary decent Irish person. No, they'll do all that. Right. But then they'll do this on the other hand. And think of what kind of treachery you have to have in you to do that. And then at the same time, they'll talk about, oh, these Ukrainians are getting free stuff that Irish people don't get, as the populist, the twee populist independent. But then on the other hand, they're making a fortune themselves off, as property owners, leasing out for these Ukrainian migrants. So the average person, even though they would love to have the money that these lads have, a lot of the average person, they really would love the money. And there's a lot they would do for a bit of money, but they'd go, I just don't have that in me. I'm sorry. I'm not going to be your big enemy. I'm not going to be a big firebrand against you. was going to look after myself. But I don't think I can bring myself to that level. Sorry, I'll do something else, right? Thank you. So that's what I mean about this. This system has a ruthless efficiency and ability to select for the small number of people, because surely only one in 1,000 people would even have the capacity to be that treacherous, really, as any of the people I've mentioned tonight. So the state somehow, informally, is very good at finding those people and launching them to the top, launching them into the right positions. And anyone else who shows good traits, good work ethic, good personableness or whatever, who could be a potential candidate, but at some point demonstrates a shred of integrity, that'll be sniffed out like a rat, and they will be kept where they are or pushed out. That is how it works. That's how you end up with someone like this, as Mr. Champion Populist of Kerry, right? Who else do we have? We have here Fianna Fáil, right? So again, a foreigner stabs 3 kids on Parnell Street. A bunch of lads naturally jump in and stop it, one of whom is a Brazilian. Apparently the first person to jump in was an Irish. He was lost to history, right? Warren. But then the one Brazilian who jumped in, they spin the narrative to, oh, it wasn't foreigners who committed a crime, it was a foreigner who stopped a crime. That's the real story, right? And so let's play that up now, and every idiot in Ireland can give money to a GoFundMe and raise him like €300,000, just to rub it in the faces of the racists, and that's spread around in all the media, the rest of it, right? Promoted. And then he comes back, I don't know, whatever it is, 6 months later, and now he's a Fianna Fáil candidate for North Inner City Dublin, which is full of Brazilians. He launches his campaign in Brazilian, directly to his Brazilian audience. And he basically, it seems here, probably doesn't really speak English at all, because you can see your one Fitzpatrick, the other Fianna Fáil, at the doors with him, is trying to like speak for him. So like what an insane situation. And you have Micheál Martin, Slippery Rat, McGee, and all of them there, like in this patently uncomfortable situation, because it's like, even on the face, even if you're not political, you watch this and you go, it's really awkward and weird. Why is it awkward and weird? Because at a deep level, it's very awkward and weird. Like if you actually drill down on what's happening here, this is wrong, it's weird, it's unnatural, there's something really off about it. And so that's in a way why it's funny. But it is really off, and you have this situation going on, and Micheál Martin is happy to stand there. Now, how many people out of 1,000 in Ireland would, if you said, listen, you'll make some money off this, you'll have clout and power and prestige and comfort, and you'll have all that, if you just do these things, which, like, surely Micheál Martin himself knows, like, this is like, you know, it is what it is. Most of those 1,000 people would just say, I'd love them, I really would love the money, but I'm not cut out for that. My conscience, even a mediocre conscience, would be like, that's just wrong. I'm not doing that. But again, that's what we have. This is Fianna Fáil. This is the rule. Is he Taoiseach? No, he's not anymore. Was recently. Like that's your Fianna Fáil. That's your mainstream Fianna Fáil. It's the independent guy. It's the NGO person leading a meeting in the middle of Lisdoonvarna during a blizzard. It's everywhere. It's all around. It's like, you know, being in some, like being abducted by aliens or something. That's kind of what it's like. This thing is that it somehow has the ability to find the worst among you and sort of, you know, Men in Black them into some sort of like other sort of creature, and it has a total ubiquitous power to just rule over you, effective, like against your interests. And you're like going, wait, isn't that meant to be like, it's public participation network, public participation? And he's former Taoiseach. Taoiseach means chief or leader. So isn't he our leader? So, but he's like, I'll just play this video. Watch it.
He's running for election now.
He's a first-time candidate for the local elections on the 7th of June, so we're hoping to get him elected. Some new blood and new energy for the North Inner City. You might know him from the incident in Parnell Square when the child in care were being attacked. He's the guy who intervened. Yes. Yeah. True hero, absolutely. Caillou.
Not bad. Why you do the Brazilian now?
And like, you know, even the Brazilians are like, this fucking wanker. Like, you know, and it's like the Brazilians know that, and Micheál Martin knows that. Like, anyone with any dignity would be like, I can't do this. I'm just gonna go in and get a job, like a normal job or whatever. I can't do this. I'd say 99.99% of people, that would be their basic disposition.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wow.
My God. My God, lads. Turn that off. That's off. That's off. That's off. Get rid of that. So, was there any more here? So this was, I mean, I'll do one final like mini subject, right? And it's just, you could say, oh, Garrod, you're talking about, like, obviously I talk about migration, invasion, plantation, demographics, all that all the time. So it's always that. I'm just, you know, emphasizing something about it. I just want to re-emphasize how bad it is, the kind of the demographic situation. I've discussed this recently in some kind of informal debate thing, and I tried to do a video on it recently. And it's like the demographic situation, we really don't know. It could be all over the place. The numbers are, it's a bit of tea leaves, really, demographics. You just kind of have to take what you see going on around you, take a split between all the stats that are available and account for maybe what's missing, and sort of come to an intuitive conclusion, an informed intuitive conclusion. And I do wonder, is it like way worse than sort of we all think, even the alarmists among us, we call it that. When you look at something like, okay, so I'll play you this one first. Somalian man. So we had a guy not too long ago, Mark Jush, he does YouTube stuff, very good, Eastern European fella, interviewing some alleged Algerian Pakistani in Mountjoy Square in Dublin. And the guy was sitting with his legs folded, being like, yeah, I have 7 kids. Yeah, they're going to come over at some point. We'll wait till we get the free house. Completely nonchalant saying this. And here we have another one. Mick O'Keefe put this up. So Somalian asylum seeker who arrived in Ireland 2 weeks ago says his lawyer, do you think he's paying for his own lawyer? No. Where's my lawyer? Where's your lawyer, right? You know, for our rights, doesn't exist. So the lawyer is helping to bring his wife and 7 children to Ireland. Now this guy can
7.
Oh, actually, this is the Mark Jush video.
Kids, wife, family.
The guy can barely speak English. He's about, what is he, 55 or something like that? 60? I don't know. He's old.
Wife,
just
kids.
have a little sample of this.
Wife, family, Somalia.
In Somalia, yes.
Somalia.
So how many? Yeah.
7.
So I'll just state the obvious. He's fleeing war in Somalia, right? Somalia might be kind of shite. I don't know what the situation is with the various factions and all that over there. But the fact is, first off, even if there was a war, there's a war you know my stance. There's wars all over the place. Ireland cannot, even if every person you brought in, you bring in 100,000 people and you say, over a few years, you say they're all, like, God told me directly that these people are the most legitimate version of an asylum seeker you can imagine. That's still not tenable for our country. There's always going to be wars. The world is huge. Ireland is small, far away. It doesn't matter. But regardless of that, well, he's fleeing war, but not fleeing war so much that he can leave his 7 kids and wife there for the time being until the lawyer sorts him out. Like, if you were actually fleeing war, you'd do whatever you have to do to just get out of the country, and you'd sort everything else out after the fact, quite obviously. So he's like standing there, chatting away. Oh, my wife, and he's not saying, oh, I'm so worried, I hope they're still alive, let me ring them now. No. So it's obviously all bullshit.
It's wife, family, Somalia.
In Somalia, yes.
Somalia.
So how many? Yeah.
7 children.
7 children. Very good. And how many wives? Just only wife. Just only one wife, yeah. And what? They come to Ireland, yes. When?
Lawyer.
Okay, so this is kind of state the obvious, but like, now someone could challenge me on this. I don't have access to every fact about what every asylum seeker gets, but let's be honest. He stays here, he seeks asylum, gets asylum, whatever. Maybe he gets a job, maybe his family get a job or whatever. But also, there's a very strong maybe he doesn't. Maybe, I mean, he'd be kind of mad to get a job in Ireland now. He'd be better off to just lean back. Almost everyone would in Ireland now because of how tight it is, like how the middle class get fucked. So it's very likely that he would just kind of avoid a job, you know, and bring the whole family in and just kind of sit it out with the NGOs and the lawyers and all that. And eventually the state, you know, some politician comes along with a giant cardboard key and takes a picture with him and his 7 kids. Now, do you think they're going to put him into some half like derelict kind of house that they bought? I saw a borderline derelict house in Naas, like 3-bedroom for 225 grand or whatever. So that's kind of what like Irish people have to settle for. But do you think he's getting that? I think we all sort of know intuitively that if he plays it along the track, and eventually they come along with the cardboard symbolic key and take a picture with him and he gets a house eventually, that is probably going to be an A-rated, new build house with, as Derek Bly once said, everything but the slippers at the end of the bed. Perfect. And the dole and the medical card and the any other basic thing you need. If like, it's not going to get into the house with the dole, with whatever, and then just be like, oh well, I don't have money for, you know, any of your basic needs are going to be met there, right? So he might strongly likely end up with like an A-rated house fit for 9 people, dole for him, and maybe some of his kids are adults, maybe they'll get it too, or if they're younger, children's allowance, and then if they have kids, definitely children's allowance. I'm kind of arriving at a point. People mention car allowance. You hear things. Some of it is probably hyperbole. Some of it is true. Chances are we're underestimating it and we don't know the half of it. Chances are if they can probably, some NGO will want to fact check me on every last detail or something. But the fact is there are probably little things like phone or this, little perks and stuff that could be accessed inside this weird little system with a million advocates for them. So it's like, you'll basically get into this situation that in Ireland, in order to have that situation, in order to have that many kids, that kind of house, your basic needs met, and the rest of it, you'd effectively need to be a millionaire, right? Like, at least you'd kind of need to be a millionaire for that. And so most Irish people could only dream of being in a situation like that. 75% of men aged 25 to 29 are staying at home in their mammy's box room. 30,000 people are sleeping in cars and on mates' couches and stuff like that, etc., etc. Like, most people couldn't even imagine that, and yet this guy's walking around going, "Oh, 7 family," and you know, like, and do you see any twinkle in his eye of, you know, I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth, but I do understand that Irish people are human beings, and I actually am somewhat aware of where I've come. I'm aware of this country. I've studied the history. I've been looking online at the geography, and I'm fascinated by this country and its history and its people. And I know it's hard on Irish people. I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. I'm sorry, but I do understand that Irish people are going through a lot as well. That's not good, you know. And so I'm going to tell you, I'm going to sort of, when I tell you that I'm coming here with my 7 kids, I'm almost going to say it wincing, you know, like it's almost like a guilty admission. I know it's bad, but you know, I have to do my own thing, you know. So, but there's no air that, no, I bring 7 kids and I get house and you know, this kind of stuff. It's like there's no empathy there at all, really, is there? Not undetectable anyway. Of like, you do realize that Irish people are suffering, and they a lot of them have 1 kid, 2 kids. They'd love to have more kids. They can't. There's no way. They would have to get the car with the extra seats and all that kind of stuff. They can't. They just can't do it. There's almost like there's an informal 2-child policy in Ireland, like the Chinese 1-kid policy. There's an informal 2-child policy maximum. It can, in theory, it can be exceeded, but in reality, it's an informal 2-child policy maximum. But now you're in a situation that only a millionaire could afford with your 6-7 kids, who you're happy to leave in Somalia, so they're not that much in a war, and we're meant to just look on and say happy days. Now, the point I wanted, rather than just doing the usual kind of giving out about it, I mean, it's real understandable giving out, but the thing I'm thinking about is like, we don't actually have numbers for family reunification in Ireland. So for every man like him who shows up, and the other guy in Mountjoy Square Park, 7 kids, get the house, they come, and you know, all this, all nonchalant. Well, he's, what is he, in 50, 60, something like that? He's old enough, so maybe some of his kids are actually like 20, 30 years old, for all we know, right? They all get in here. Nobody, your man Mark didn't actually ask him, do you have any grandchildren? How many of them are there? Or whatever. And if they don't have kids yet, well, they will have kids. if they're dependents of the state and all of that, so what I'm saying basically is, by letting this guy in, it starts with him. So that you're looking at your asylum seeker stats, but that doesn't cover the half of it, because he comes in, and then his 7 kids come in, and family reunification has been slightly tightened up. It used to be you could bring any of your dog's nephew in or whatever, right? But now it's as far as I know, you can bring in your children, your spouse, or your parents. But of course, so he gets his asylum, and it's expedited for Somalians and loads of other countries. He gets in, and you think, okay, that's one asylum seeker. What a disaster! Oh, it's unfair on us. Yeah. But then he brings in his 2 parents, so that's 3. And then he brings in his wife, and that's 4. And then he brings in his 7 kids, and that's 11, right? And then those kids, and they're completely in this Somalian community, not really integrating. I'm speaking generally here, not specifically about him. I can't say, right? But so now you have 11 of them. They're kind of liaising with the Somalian community, running things among themselves, totally gaming the system because they have it all worked out. And there's no shame. There's no, they just maximize it. And they know the NGOs establishment is waiting for them to set it all up, right? And so then those 7 kids have, I'll be reasonable, right, and say they have 2 kids each on average. So that's 14 kids among the 7 of them. So we have 14 plus 7, 21, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 21. And then you have your man, 22, his wife, 23, and his 2 parents, 25. So like, this guy is like waffling on about like, oh yeah, my family, but whatever. And you're going, this is a complete injustice. It's bad. We're being demographically overrun with all these asylum seekers. But when you look at this man, potentially you can clone it out to 25. And that could only be for starters. We don't know what other little things they can do. But you could, under the law as it is, the family reunification and all that, you could have 25, if you allow a couple of years for a few kids to be born and all that. You could have 25 of him like that, right? And I'm just kind of trying to demonstrate to you the scale we're at here. Like, with all these people coming in, you have hundreds of thousands of, like last year, I think it was Pascal Donoghue said 166,000 work visas or something like that, right? And then you have all these other programs. There's the asylum thing, there's IPA, there's leave to remain. It's all squirrely. And then you have family reunification, which can just take one person and clone them into 10 people like that. And all these different schemes going on, and they're all able to double up and triple up or 10 times up potentially in certain circumstances. And Irish people have net below replacement fertility and net emigration of our people. It's kind of like, it's like you don't even need to sit down, as I was doing recently, and trying to nerd out on the exact statistics and what year will we become a minority. It's just kind of obvious that if you have a situation like that, it's not that you have years left until you're disempowered or something. It's happening in front of you. If not, it's happened already. Where does a game theory that situation out and just come on, right? And we're meant to just sit back, and these people have rights and advocacy and all these things, an absolute right to accommodation, which we apparently don't really have in practice. So they have all these rights. Again, we're back to this military invasion, slave colony, and it's just like how tenable, how sustainable is that for human beings to be under that thing? And this is the one, just I wanted to set it up with that one, and then you get back to like, there's just another, that's asylum, but then you get to a totally different situation where it's this is from Mick O'Keefe again in Cork. Indians demanding residency permits. Over the last 6 years, Indians make up the largest immigrant group in Ireland. Over 5,000 have arrived in the first 5 months of 2024. Now, I'm not going to get into or be fact-checked or any of that about the piddling details of all these laws, because the laws change every 5 minutes. There's a million of them. I'm not a paid NGO worker, so that's not quite my business. But if 5,000 have arrived in just the first 5 months of 2024, that's not 23, that's not 22, that's not next year. That's just in 5 months, 5,000 arrived. 5,000 Indians in front of you, right? It's a lot of people. And now they're looking for, residency permits. And of course, when they get that with NGO backing and all of that, then they get the passport and the big lavish citizenship ceremony in Killarney or whatever, with the Ukrainian councillor in attendance. But like, so like a lot of them could just end up getting citizenship. Let's face it, an immigrant gets here by hook or by crook: asylum, leave to remain, residency permit. They don't have a residency permit, they're looking for it. Doesn't matter. We all know that any migrant can come here under any pretense at all. And if they are just willing to stay here, play the game, liaise with the NGOs, and hang out long enough, they can just stay. I think, and that's why when someone says, "Do we have an open border?" I'm like, "No, we've worse, because we have the open border, but we also have a like triple tier system, and we're at the bottom, and they have all these extra rights." So, like, you know, the fact is, 5,000 Indians can come in just 5 months. What would it be for the rest of the year? So you end up, I don't know, you could be pushing up towards 20,000 Indians in just a year, right? Somewhere there. And the same previous year. Now you go 20,000 Indians in a year, and that's, by the way, that's not immigrants. That's just Indian immigrants. What are you at with the, let's say, call it rounded up to 20,000 in a year? Is that what the population in Navan, Drogheda? Maybe not that, but it's like a big town, and that's just 1 year of one immigrant community. And again, a lot of them, I don't know the exact rules with Indians and residency permits and if they get citizenship, but ultimately, if an Indian stays here long enough and they get their way up towards a citizenship or close to it, you know that there's going to be some other law in play that they say, well, now I want to bring my mom and dad. Now I want to bring my wife and my 3 kids. And then those 3 kids are going to, you know, it's like, you know, it's very, 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 very bad in that sense. So, like, meanwhile, you have the Somalian on the canal, but then down in Cork, you have these Indians picketing around the place. And then you have the Ukrainian in Killarney running for election with a high chance of getting it, saying she wants to represent new communities. And then you've Roscrea, you've Sabrina Doran with her new majority of people in these centres, and she's gloating about giving them all a vote and saying that Irish people, effectively far right, won't have an ability to, even at the ballot box, to oppose it. Ha ha ha. And this is happening all over the country, all these pockets, boom, 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 boom. It's like, this is an overrunning. Like, this is a complete overrunning. And I don't think even people who are nationalist or into this kind of stuff, I don't think we, you, and even me, even as I'm saying it and I'm trying to emphasize the point, it's like, I don't even think I'm quite grasping it, because you don't have a sort of eagle's view of really everything that's going on, the amount of like overrunning that's actually going on in all these different ways. You know, there's so many ways we probably don't even know about. What we know about and what we can see is already outlandish, and yet there's more. You know, the state is completely designed to have all of these secret little things going on, a million different representations and rights and avenues for all sorts of migrants from all sorts of backgrounds and definitions to come into the country and set up shop and bring all the rest of their people in. And again, it's a world of 8 billion people. Most countries are less developed than Ireland. Ireland is, there's what, like 3.5 million Irish people in the Republic. It's kind of, which is like a fresh sliver of New York or London, you know, is very bad in that sense. I'm like blackpill you. I mean, it kind of sounds like I am, really, doesn't it, though? But I mean, this was the Gaeltacht. Just I'll end on this. This was the Gaeltacht in Ireland. For anyone who doesn't already know, Gaeltacht is a Irish-speaking community, sort of in like it's like an official thing where an area is like full of Irish speakers, basically, and everything's done in Irish. The signs, everything's Oscailga Irish, and that was almost seen as, in Ireland, almost like a nature reserve, like a sanctuary for our culture and our language. Like people don't speak Irish in Dublin. Most people can't speak Irish. But if you go to a Gaeltacht, it's like a place where pandas are protected or whatever. You know, you go there and it's actually real people, real living their lives, Oscailga in Irish. And you go there and it's not just the language, but even the feel of it. You're like, oh yeah, this is like the early 90s. It feels twee and lovely. And, you know, you'd love to raise your kids there. You know, it's a protected habitat in a sense. And that's the whole purpose of it. And now, of course, they bring in a team of guards and they... So, you know, you get the idea, but it's like, it kind of relates to, it's not just a tangent, it relates to what I was kind of saying, in that you have all this going on across the country. Like, I think I've given you the geography, the distribution of it, all this sort of stuff. It's like, what's the word? It's full spectrum, right? It's deep, it's wide, it's forward, it's in every dimension, like going 90. And yet, even in these small little areas that are supposed to be designed effectively to be natural preserve habitats for Irish people, Irish language, Irish culture, even in these small, and there was only like what proportion of the country is Gaeltacht, to like 0.5% geographically or whatever, or per population wise. It's like Native Americans in a preserve or whatever. It's like you take that and then you take a Native American reservation and then you ship in a load of Russians or something, you know, into the place, and you say, oh yeah, they're going to live here now. And it's worse as well, because we've seen that Gael schools, which are Irish schools, there's been story, you can look it up, where they've had to actually move to English in order to cope with the Ukrainian refugees that they have in them, because it's just like, as much as they're designed to speak Irish and that's the rule, it's like, well, if you throw 50 Ukrainian kids in here, they can barely speak English anyway. Just practically speaking, the Irish thing has to kind of go out the window, like just on a purely logistical level. And so it does go out the window. And that's the whole point of it. They're meant to be there to preserve our culture, these small little minority of schools. So that goes out the window. So if that can be true for a Gael skull, it can be true for a Gaeltacht, of course, as well. Because if you bring enough of these people in, practically speaking, the Irish thing sort of has to just wilt and go away. It's already under pressure just from modernity as it is. Now you inject a big ton of foreigners in. It's just, you know, it's like that gets me, because it is so full spectrum. And even a place that's this almost borderline, because they are funded and maintained and stuff, this kind of artificially protected habitat that's specifically designed for Irish people and Irish culture and Irish language, particularly, is just cast aside as well. It'd be like, like even the American government doesn't do that with Native Americans. Like, you know, even as bad as it is over there and how they are, their whole diversity and, you know, forced integration, forced plantation. To my knowledge, they don't take busfuls of Guatemalans and park them into the middle of an Native American reservation. That would be seen as, well, that's crazy. Like, I mean, let's go everywhere else, but surely. So it's almost like it's intentional. They won't leave anywhere alone. Somewhere near a halting site in Clonmel, oh, you're not going to fuck with the travellers. Well, we might. East Wall, oh, you're not going to fuck with the hardcore lads in the inner city. Well, maybe we'll actually make a point of doing that. Oh, well, you're not going to bring them to a Gaeltacht like that, are you? No, come on, it's a sliver, it's protected. We might do that too, actually. Actually, we might make a point of doing that. We might make a point of it. You're not going to turn Lisdoonvarna into a third of its own population over a few years. We might just do that. You're not going to have one of your minions gloat to the entire population of Roscrea that they're subjugating them. Maybe that too. Maybe we'll pay them as well. So that's kind of you know, tonight's not really a solutions night. Tonight is a bit of a just kind of like red pill, wake you up, remind you of the importance of this. Because even you or I, we're paying attention to this stuff and you get jaded and it's also overwhelming. It's negative. I understand all that. But it's like you get to a point where you see you're like flicking through the channels and you sort of get used to it. And one of my jobs perhaps is to sort of, if you're becoming overly familiar and saturated with it, to kind of try to like slap you across the face and slap myself across the face and throw cold water on my face and sort of not become discombobulated. And to remember, this is really not normal. This is not at all normal. No matter how common it is, and the fact that it's happening, and even if there's nothing we can do about it, it's always important to hold on to the basic fact of like, nothing that's happening here is normal. It's not right. It's not normal compared to history of Ireland or the world, and it's not normal compared to the majority of the world as is now. Mongolia, Venezuela, you know, Iran, Singapore, South Korea, you name it. There's a big world out there we're not quite in touch with, but like, you know, outside of this horrible fishbowl we're forced to live inside, it's actually not normal. It's like our view of a North Korean, you know, the idea that they don't actually know that outside of there it's not like that and the world is different. There's this whole other world, and you know, it's kind of like that for us. Like, we are in a thing here. We are in some sort of bizarre, cruel, totalitarian experiment, and no amount of daily repetition of it makes it normal. And always just remember that. But anyway, I've rambled enough for tonight. I'll leave it there. Let's check if there's any super chats and then wrap it up. So Thanks for everybody who jumped in. Just in general. So Dennis Carr. Oh wait, Keith showed me how to do this. Dennis Carr, €10. Chucky Girl Law. I love it. I love Chucky Girl Law. We have so much in our heritage and our culture. Even a simple phrase like that, so good. James Bond says Chucky Girl Law. Okay, so happy days. Thank you. Sorry, £20 as well. Thank you very much. Finola Omaraku, €5. And what's that? Shamrock. I'm getting blind. I always thought I'd have good eyes for my whole life and stuff. That's never going to happen to me, but I think I need to get a check or something. Roddy Murray, €5. Thanks very much. Says, regarding NGO lackeys, the Soviet Union had mental patients and sexual freaks running the gulags. Assault in gulags was normal. Beauty was a curse. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and there's a Morgoth video on that. If anyone in the chat, regular, you don't have to super chat, just regular chat, can remember the name of that video or that article, it was very good. He kind of did. It's like the one-stop shop for that. Whatever I'm trying to get at there, that essay is like open and shut. That point. Overall, and he refers to gulags and stuff too. But that's exactly what I think of someone like. I mean, just take one look at her. This Sabrina Doran or whatever. Come on, like that person has like the power to gloat so brazenly to a whole community like that. I love this username as well. This next one, literally Kittler says, or €5 and no comment. Thanks very much. Anyway, appreciate it. Imperator Scotterum. I've been realizing that like I struggle to pronounce that every time because it's just tongue ties me. But that's probably some like Latin god or something that I should be familiar with and like be able to rattle off and be familiar with. But anyway, regular contributor. I know Mod as well. €6. It says protest in Newtown, Mount Kennedy tomorrow, 7 p.m. departing from Top Oil Station. MEP candidates Michael Leahy and Una McGurk will be in attendance. Very good. Yeah, they're both solid, cool people. I find Una McGurk a fascinating case study because she happened her way into being a dissident I can't say that, I don't know her life or whatever, but like she was working. This isn't a criticism, but she worked in the regime. She was an esteemed, think of this senior counsel or whatever for the foreigners have a right to housing, Irish people don't case. Like proper esteemed, like high up in the status realm, within the structure, the power establishment, legal, you get it. She was that. Even you listen to her, you look at her, she's got that effect, right? She's very and she's very coherent and cogent and verbose and all that. All those skills of a barrister or whatever she is. And yet she got targeted hard by the regime. Sort of, I'm just speculating. Maybe more than she would have bargained for. You think, well, I'm going to go along to a COVID demo and say I don't think masks are effective. Surely that's just like the worst someone could say is I'm a COVID dissident and whatever. But where she got hauled over the hot coals entirely, completely. I don't know if any of you remember all sorts of leading politicians, Taoiseach, Minister for Justice, all these people are coming out naming and condemning her for being at this thing because other people were present. It spiraled out. I did a video years ago called, it's on my YouTube, it's called Paranoid State. I did a video about my feelings on it at the time. But, fast forward, she's a candidate now in Ireland South, probably pretty red-pilled on like most stuff. So it's funny thing, So, Armchair Limerick Nationalist, regular. Thank you very much. €5. Sound for all of the great insight and info, Garrod. You were doing great work. Cheers. Thank you very much. I always feel I'm always torn between, I'm either shilling the chat because I don't want to what's the word? I don't want to sell myself short. But then it's funny because like regulars will contribute regularly, a little something every time. And I'm like, I almost feel like saying, thanks. By all means, keep going. But at the same time, don't feel obliged. It's one of those things. Like, there's all, anyway, I get silly talking about this kind of stuff. But so the next one is Oh, sorry. Just by the way, yeah. Keep going. I will keep going, and thanks, and I appreciate it. So, Warrior X269 €2 and says, "I suggest stop. I'm not reading that. Sorry. Thanks. I appreciate it, but no. There you go. Anyway, or like, you know, on the spot, like I just let's move on to the next one. So Sheepdog says, sorry, it's important to have a good rant. We can change this very easily. Yeah. And it's just, you know, the thing that gets me is like, and that's kind of what I'm doing and what everybody's doing of it is trying to normalize it. I was talking to someone recently about this, the idea that like there's something totally, when you think about all the subjugation in Ireland, and I'm going to get a little bit critical of normies now. There's a brief thing riffing off a super chat, but a lot of people are woken up in Ireland and all that, but there's still this tendency of a completely defeated people. Like the way people in Lisdoonvarna had no organization. They were just a defeated class of people, right? No representation, no leaders. Think of, say what you want about Iran. I didn't mention Iran, but like, you know, they have a community, like they say everyone in Iran is a dissident and hates the regime, but that's not quite true. You know, they're against the modernity American thing. They're against liberal globalist values. So to some extent or another, they do sort of identify with their regime and their regime identifies with them. And they have this highly kind of organized structure of clerics and politicians. And they have this whole thing, like their people on the world stage are represented. I mentioned foreigners in Ireland being able to come in and bite women on the face and feel up young girls on buses and get a slap on the wrist and permission to stay here as long as they like. You know, that in effect won't happen to an Iranian girl. They won't get bitten on the face and they won't get felt up on a bus because that guy would end up swinging from something, right? And the people who represent them are effectively there to protect them from all these kind of things. And to put it most simply, they have true, not like the way Micheál Martin was allegedly my Taoiseach on paper, but they have true, meaningful representation. They, as people of a nation state, have true representation. And they might not all agree with the regime, but they, in some sense, they have true representation from a sovereign, powerful system, a state. And so they are protected from predation, both inside and out to some degree. Whereas, you know, we don't have that. So you end up with a totally scattered people. You know, do you think if in some Iranian town, a bunch of like, you know, a bunch of African, like, you know, 8 coachloads of African were brought into town, they wouldn't all be sitting there going, I'm scared to say anything. I have no elder or leader or representative who I can go to and just tell it to them like it is. And, you know, they wouldn't, they would have all that. They'd be like, what's going on? They would just probably rebel because they have that empowerment in them. They feel like, well, no, ultimately I'm in a state that I have some connection to here and isn't hostile to me, not entirely hostile to me, across like a full spectrum, like I was talking about, like rule by traitor. We don't have that. And same in China, same in most countries. Whereas here, you will have that scattered nature. And what you find is that even though most Irish people are against immigration and all of that, if you were speaking to a normal person, you're out in a park or whatever, and you just happen to start chatting to someone, your dogs are saying hello to each other, you start chatting about, oh gosh, yeah, oh, housing's gone mad or whatever. And you said, oh yeah, it's just like, if you made a really, really light comment to say like, oh yeah, it's just gone mad. It's mad the way they just all that, like a lot of the houses are just bought up. I saw something on the news recently, 25 billion worth of property is owned by these foreign investment funds. And then, you know, I suppose when it's like that, you know, prices are just going to go up because it's designed that way. And, you know, just bring in so many people and, you know, limit the supply and all these things. You know, it's just going to create this kind of thing. So that's what, you know, and so you're not going off into total political hardcore tirade. You're being lighthearted, but you're just saying, I suppose that's the way it is. So young people haven't got a hope, and you leave it at that. There's almost like a twang that someone would go, oh, I'd rather talk about United and Liverpool. I don't know. There's this kind of thing where people have it in them where like you shouldn't talk about that. That would be very drab and inappropriate, unpolite. But to talk about Liverpool versus Man United would be. So basically, one thing is an inappropriate subject for conversation, even if it's relatively lighthearted or calm. And another thing, if you switch to, did you see Manchester United versus Liverpool? 2 commercial teams in the UK who aren't even connected to those areas really at all, kicking a ball around the field, grown men, I hate to sound like that, but kicking a ball around the field, basically, millionaires. And you're meant to sit there and watch them and say, and I'm not against watching football, but just if that's appropriate, then talking about the fundamental basis of your own society around you maybe isn't always the right conversation. Maybe it's not always lighthearted enough, but surely at some point that's like, it's not, how is it inappropriate? How is it never appropriate to discuss in some fashion the basic fundamentals of the society around you, especially under such extreme circumstances? But there is still this thing of like, it's like, I think in Iranian coffee shops, I keep mentioning, I'll just take them as the example. In Iranian little coffee shops and all that, middle-aged men sit down and talk. I'd say there's far more, they sit down and they talk about the world and about things that are going on and the state of the country and controversial issues and stuff. You know, I'd say there's more of that. Ireland is so, or the West is so repressed in that sense that it's hard to even sort of talk. And the problem is that you can't avoid, if people in your culture, your community, or whatever, your polity or something, if they don't even have the basic ability and willingness and sort of culture of, in normal society, being able to talk about obvious basic things that totally affect your life and totally affect your kids' lives and are definitely more important than United versus Liverpool. If you can't do that, that's step one. If you can't do that, then it's no wonder the buses come in, you're overrun, there's no organization, there's no community structure, there's no dissident sort of organic structures and hierarchies and all that. How could you have that if you can't even open your mouth to say, do you not think it's a bit weird that X and Y is happening? Like, I know we don't know each other that well, but I know, like, the conversation kind of naturally led that way, so I'm going to let it go there. Like, whereas someone could totally clam up or think, like, you know, that I'm kind of rambling, but it's like, you mentioned it's important to have a good rant. And there needs to be sort of a culture of like, why is it that we all have to walk around talking about, like, maybe talk about the recycling machines are a bit of a mess? Like, that's the, like, it's, you're kind of allowed to have stuff like that, or cyclists think they own the road. Like, you're allowed to talk about stuff like that. But if you say, oh yeah, no, cyclists think they own the road, it's gas, those machines don't really work. And it's kind of weird that we brought in like 1 million immigrants in the last few years. Isn't that, like, I'm not saying I hate them or anything. I'm just saying it's weird, isn't it? It was like, it's like, but like you said, recycling machines were important. And if complaining about political issues or infrastructural things in our lives that bother us, I mean, you told me it was okay when you brought up recycling machines. It wasn't dry or antisocial or whatever to bring that up. So, you know, suddenly it is then with anything else, you know. So I don't know, people should, like, it's cooked as fuck to not be able to, as grown adults, to be like, talk to someone and say, listen, what's going on in their lives. Think of how infantilizing and childish that is. But so last one is and thank you, last one there, but teacher Connor €5 says, just back from canvassing and postering for Edmund Shanahan, the Irish People Party in Kimmage Rathmines. Fair play. You know, some people criticize Stream, oh, you're waffling on now, other people are campaigning. Maybe you're not saying that, but people do different things at different times. I have my uses, and so I wasn't canvassing tonight, but fair play. I'm kind of being like unnecessarily defensive there. What I really should be saying is fair play. Well done. Probably thinking of someone else who criticized me in that way, and you're not. But yeah, so thanks for that. Yeah, you know, everybody vote. It's too late now to register, but canvass, get it all going. Hopefully there's not 5,000 Ukrainians in your area who are going to outvote you. That's no reason to become disenchanted. Throw the votes in anyway. But yeah, so look, it's late in the night now. I'll just stop. Yeah, thanks for joining me as always. I'll be back again soon, and take care of yourselves. Iho.